Who was Dr. Seuss? Today, we're going to be reading the introduction, Chapter 1, and Chapter 2. Who was Dr. Seuss? In 1985, Princeton University awarded honorary degrees to 6 people. An honorary degree is given to a person who has done something important for the world. The students were most excited about one of the people being honored, when a tall, thin man with a gray beard stood up. They all leaped to their feet. "I am Sam," they chanted. "Sam, I am." Then they recited from memory all of Green Eggs and Ham. It was a special way to show Theodore Geisel, better known as Dr. Seuss, how much his books meant to them. Among the Princeton students that year was Michelle Robinson. Many years later, she married Barack Obama and became the First Lady of the United States. In 2010, she chose another Dr. Seuss book, The Cat in the Hat, to read aloud to the nation's school children. The First Lady knew that books for beginning readers used to be solemn and boring. Then Dr. Seuss appeared with his bouncy rhymes and wild and crazy characters like the Cat in the Hat, Horton, and the Grinch. Learning to read was never the same again. Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Goofy Machines. Theodore Seuss Geisel was born in Springfield, Massachusetts on March 2, 1904. Springfield was full of factories turning out cars, guns, bicycles, tires, and toys. One of the factories was a brewery that Ted's grandfather had started called Combeck and Geisel. Ted's father became the president of the company. Its beer was so popular that the people of Springfield nicknamed the business Comeback and Guzzle. Ted grew up in a family that loved wordplay. His mother's family owned a bakery. As a child, she made up rhymes listing the pie flavors. Later, she sang her children to sleep with the same rhymes. Ted believed that his love of verse came from his memories of those pie poems. His sister, 2 years older, was named Margaretha, but she nicknamed herself Marnie Mecca Ding Ding Guy. His father, also named Theodore, liked to dream up goofy, complicated inventions in his spare time. Ted's favorite was a silk stocking bean seam wrong detecting mirror. Young Ted loved to hang around the zoo. He got special treatment because his father helped to run the zoo. Sometimes, he said, they let me in the cage with the small lions and the small tigers, and I got chewed up every once in a while. He was famous for exaggerating when he told stories. After a visit to the zoo, Ted would rush home and draw animals on the walls of his room. Somehow, the animals never ended up looking quite like what he had seen, so he would make up names for them. One of his mother's favorites was a creature with ears that were 9 feet long. He called it Wimp. Like many people in Springfield, the Geisels came from Germany. Ted grew up speaking both German and English. In 1914, World War I started in Europe. Many countries were fighting against Germany. The United States was not in the war yet. That didn't happen until 1917. But Germans were becoming very unpopular in America. At school, German-American children were often bullied. Sometimes kids would throw rocks at Ted. The Geisel family tried hard to prove that they were patriotic Americans. Ted's Boy Scout troop had a contest to see who could sell the most Liberty Bonds, a way to help the government support the war effort. Ted's grandfather bought $1,000 worth. This made Ted one of the winners. At the award ceremony, medals were given out by former President Theodore Roosevelt, but someone in the Boy Scouts had made a mistake. There were 10 winners, yet Roosevelt had only won 9 medals. When he ran out of medals, Ted was standing alone on stage. Roosevelt bellowed, "What's this little boy doing here?" No one explained that Ted was a winner too. Ted slunk away. From then on, it was hard for Ted to get up in front of people. Even after he was famous, he refused to give speeches. When he tried to appear on a television talk show, he was so scared that he couldn't say a word. After the war ended in 1918, Ted's family faced a new problem. As 1920 began, Prohibition became the law in the United States. Prohibition meant that it was illegal to make or sell alcohol, including beer. The brewery had to close, and Ted's father was out of a job. The family still had enough to live on, but the loss of the brewery was a terrible blow. Now the family had much less money, just as Ted was about to graduate from high school. But education was important to the Geisel family. No matter what, they made sure there was enough money for Ted to go to college. Ted had never paid much attention to his schoolwork. He spent most of the time writing jokes for the school paper. The one class that interested him was English. Ted's English teacher had gone to Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. He loved Dartmouth so much that Ted decided to go there too. Prohibition. In 1920, it became illegal to sell or manufacture alcohol in the United States. The 18th Amendment, called Prohibition, was passed by activists who thought drinking liquor was ruining people's lives. But Prohibition was not very successful. Crime groups such as the Mafia became more powerful by smuggling liquor. Gangsters like Al Capone became folk heroes. Most people kept on drinking, even though it meant they were breaking the law. Many towns had a speakeasy, a place where you could buy alcoholic drinks if you knew the secret password or knock. The amendment was especially hard on people like the Geisels, who had made their living selling alcohol. Ted never forgot what it did to his family. Many of his early cartoons made fun of Prohibition. Cities that had been made famous for their breweries suddenly lost their most important business, and all the tax money and jobs that went with them. Some breweries tried to survive by selling soda. Other places sold grape juice or malt syrup. They included careful instructions telling their customers exactly what not to do to their juice or syrup to make sure it didn't turn into alcohol. By the 1930s, it was clear that Prohibition was a failed experiment. In 1933, President Franklin Roosevelt signed a law that helped end it. Then he said, "I think this would be a good time for a beer." Chapter 2, A Very Fine Flying Cow. Ted loved Dartmouth. It was located in green countryside with beautiful old buildings. He made friends there who he kept for the rest of his life. Shortly after he arrived, he discovered the school humor magazine, Jack-O-Lantern, fondly known as Jacko. It became his dream to work on Jacko, and he started spending all his time in the office. Staff members would find him there in the morning, fast asleep at his typewriter. He was quickly elected to the staff, and at the end of his junior year, he was made editor-in-chief. The students loved his stories and drawings, and he became a very important person at Dartmouth. Even so, his classmates voted him least likely to succeed. Ted never seemed to be serious about anything. A month before graduation, Ted threw a party. The guests shared a bottle of gin. When a couple of boys began horsing around on the roof, Ted's landlord called the police. Because of Prohibition, gin was illegal, so Ted was in a lot of trouble. As punishment, he was not allowed to write for Jacko anymore, but he found a way around this. He signed his work with fake names. He had already used joke names such as Ooh La La McCarty and Theo Lessig. Lessig was Geisel, spelled backwards. Now he started using just his middle name, Seuss. At Dartmouth, Ted had spent all his time on Jacko. His grades were not very good. Ted's father was afraid that he wouldn't be able to get a job after college, but Ted told his dad not to worry. He was going to Oxford, a famous university in England. What's more, he said, he had won a prize to pay for it. His father was so thrilled that he told the local newspaper. The next day, Ted was headline news. But there was a problem. Ted had applied to Oxford, but he hadn't really won any money. He only hoped he would. Ted had to tell his father the truth. The older Geisel was a very proud man. He had already announced to the world that Ted was going to Oxford, so he decided that he would have to pay for his son to go. In the summer of 1925, Ted boarded a steamship for the long journey to England. Ted never really fit in at Oxford. The university was about 800 years old. All the students seemed very serious. The lectures bored him. Ted tried to listen and take notes, but his mind wandered. Instead, he doodled. The pages of his notebooks were filled with chickens, with windmill tails, dogs walking across tightropes, and cows with wings. Helen Palmer, another American, was at Oxford studying to be a teacher. One day, she looked over Ted's shoulder to see what he was drawing. "That's a very fine flying cow," she said. Helen told Ted his drawings were special. She said he should be an illustrator. Helen's remark changed Ted's life. He realized he didn't want to teach. He didn't want to write novels. He just wanted to keep drawing his mixed-up animals. After that, Ted and Helen spent all their time together. One day, he proposed and Helen accepted. But they couldn't get married yet. They didn't have any money. After she graduated from Oxford, Helen took a teaching job in New Jersey. Ted dropped out of school and moved back in with his parents in Springfield, Massachusetts. He knew what he wanted to do with his life. Now, he just had to figure out how to make a living from his drawings.